Well, Chris, we're back for another episode of The Bully Pulpit. I'll let you introduce yourself first this time.
I am Chris Matola, political consultant for 40 years and 7 presidential, 11 governors, 8 U.S. senators, and a lot of scar tissue.
I am Justin Schoenfelder, the founder and CEO of Fantasy Elect. And in these episodes, if you've watched any of them, I basically just ask Chris questions and let him give us his wisdom because he's been doing it for a long time and he knows so much. If you go back and you look at his over-unders, I think he's got batting about 90%. Well, Chris, this is a pretty interesting week. Tomorrow is the South Carolina primaries. We're recording on
Right.
Friday the 23rd. We will get to that, but it's been an interesting week, and I think there's a lot to cover. And I want to start with what I think could potentially be a repeat of the 22 midterms in a slightly different tenor, and that is the
Mhm.
Alabama IVF ruling. What that will do as far as motivating suburban women swing votes against Republicans. Maybe it won't do anything. I don't know. But where do you see that headed, um, and the effect it's going to have on 2024?
I think it's two things. Right before we jumped on, apparently Trump put out a statement very pro IVF. And it was clear, and
Yes, he
wasn't
did.
clear. It wasn't clear. It was clearly not one of these ranting kind of crazy posts that are kind of read like haiku. It was a well thought out um, policy statement. Um, and apparently the NRSC, the Republican Senate Committee, apparently they've been back and forth and had some issues on it this morning. I've not, frankly, I did not follow that. But two things: the merit of the judicial ruling. Besides, you have to be fucking brain dead as a politician to say I think this is a good thing. I mean, because it's demonstrably not, and it's dumb. I mean, I haven't seen a polling question on it, but it's got to be a 90-10 question on it. And it's not even close. Uh, so that's one. Number two, and so the fact that Republicans, the fact that Trump is getting it right, Haley didn't say anything about it, which was crazy, and that Republicans are kind of fumbling it at some levels, at some committees are fumbling it. Um, nothing shocks me in politics, but this was a no-brainer. This was a chip shot, and what it does, I think, globally in terms of the setting environment, it's another piece where if you are a reasonable voter, you say Republicans can't be trusted on abortion. Republicans can't be trusted on these rights issues.
It's funny that you say that. The first thing I would say is when I saw the tweet from Trump about IVF, the first thing I thought of was you and the high praise you have for his team of being really smart
Yeah.
campaign organizers, campaigners, and I thought they wrote it. Like what I saw and the kind of the interaction, I was like, yeah, this didn't come from him. This came from somebody very astute. um, but I could be wrong. The other thing I would say is, part of me, I'm curious what you think about this. I actually think this is worse for Republicans than abortion because if Democrats are smart, they say this isn't even about abortion. This is about having a family. They're making your access to have children harder and more difficult. So you can be pro-life, anti-abortion all day long, and this could sway you against Republicans, if it's played right, because access to abortion is one thing. Access to IVF is a completely different thing. I think it's a bigger group. It's a broader base of people who now feel that their ability to start a family is being affected by Republican. Not the ability to not start a family. The ability to start a family is being affected by Republican policy.
Yeah,
Did you?
I mean, you're kind of going in and out with a little latency problem here.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's no possible coalition. What I did think was interesting is that also this week there was, I think it was the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, had a woman spokesperson that said, well, really what we should be doing is getting rid of birth control methods like the pill, because it will stop people from having reckless recreational sex. And a couple conservative commentators said, yeah, that's what. And it's like, are you out of your cotton picking fucking mind? I guess you not supposed to say cotton picking anymore, but it's like, but it was like,
you can say, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" You just can't say "out of your cotton picking fucking
yeah,
mind."
I can say fuck. Fuck is approved. Cotton is not. So I kind of get it. But no, but I mean,
right.
I was channeling my grandmother.
Say, Chris? Yeah, you know what they never say? We need to prevent vasectomies to stop recreational sex. I don't think Democrats are wrong that this is a war on women, not a war on anybody else. They are never attacking Viagra or vasectomies or any other thing that affects men. It's only the things that affect women and the women's right to control their own bodies. I think that there's a really good argument there.
Yeah,
for the
and there was
base of
also,
the Democrats.
and as a corollary, and again, this thing pushes people into odd places. A lot of times, hot button and cultural policy issues will make people say stupid things. There was an article, I believe, I want to say it was in the Atlantic. It might have been in the Cut this week, where some conservative said, well, if you father a child, you need to be responsible to pay for it in perpetuity. And the kind of the liberal, the columnist was saying, what an outrage that you're going to make fathers responsible now for recreational sex.
Really?
It was this really bizarre thing. So there was a great story that Roger Ailes, who kind of helped create Fox News and was a political consultant, used to tell. Before he did that, he was a producer in Philadelphia for a show called The Mike Douglas Show. And it was the first nationally syndicated kind of talk show that was light entertainment. It was kind of newsy. It was, it really looks like modern cable now, because it's a combination of some newsmakers and celebrities, promoting stuff. But they had I believe it was an Earth Day episode where it was this kind of typical big business guy with this kind of typical hippie, and they're both incredibly, and you go back, you can find it on YouTube, I think, and they're both incredibly cliched now looking back at it. But the hippie was really kind of scoring points on the business guy who was not prepared for this. And the hippie was like, hey man, you're the reason people can't breathe the air. And the businessman was like, young man, there are some things more important than breathing. And I'm paraphrasing it, but that's what happens with these stupid cultural arguments, is that people get pushed into corners that make no sense. I mean, being against recreational sex, being against, and the point was for the Heritage Foundation person is that sex should be for procreation. Which is, this very kind of, it's not even a Catholic thing, but the idea that you can be over 50 or that you can, you've had enough kids and you were taking birth control measures and somehow that's a terrible thing is just fucking insane. And I think
Yeah,
that even if it's just a small piece of it, it makes the party insane and it makes conservatives insane.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like if you are taking a position based on your in-group identity rather than common sense based on what that specific argument is, you're going to end up having to throw common sense out the window to
Yeah,
maintain the argument because nothing is true
exactly.
all of the time. Everything is
Exactly.
situational. So, generally speaking, whenever I hear a government talk about anybody's private life, and it
Yeah.
almost always manifests itself at some point in sex. Why is any government involved in sex at all? It's none of your business, regardless, right? That's my American version of it. There may be other cultures and other countries where the government is very involved in it because it's a theocracy or some other thing.
Right.
But in the United States, like, just don't involve yourself in anybody's sex life. And which leads me to the knock on effects of this, which is, and this is something that I've shared in social media engagement for us. Anyone who believes the government has the right to prevent abortion simply based on common sense must also believe that the government has the right to force abortion. Because if you have the right to do one, you have the right to do the other. If it's up to the government to decide what you do with a child or a fetus or whatever, you're calling it a child, but a fetus, then you're basically saying the
Mhm.
government has the right to make determinations in such a situation. And I think that that's there's always that slippery slope argument that people like to throw out in certain reasons, but I just think that that is a potentiality. Also, when it comes to common sense, if there's the part of this argument is in the House, they have the Life at Conception Act.
Mhm.
So a knock-on effect of that is you cannot deport an illegal immigrant woman who's pregnant because her fetus became an American citizen at conception, or I can now take a tax deduction on my pregnant wife's fetus. What if then she has a miscarriage in the following year? Do then I have to go back and amend my tax returns? There are just so many common sense knock on effects that by getting involved based on your own religious dogma, you're making what is meant to be non religious administrative state stuff way more
Yeah.
complicated because you're involving these things that shouldn't be involved.
And I think you've hit a really, 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 really fundamental point and an important one about the administrative state turning the power of private lives over to the administrative state. There was this woman on MSNBC yesterday, and her argument was that she was talking about Christian nationalism. And she said, well, they believe everything comes from God, and it doesn't come from God. Your rights come from government, which is,
Mm.
I mean, like, whoever gave her college degree is probably wincing because, the fundamental setup of America was that rights come. I mean, Jefferson didn't call it God. I mean, Jefferson was really fascinating. He was kind of you couldn't say he was religious. You know what the Jefferson Bible is? I'm sorry, you froze there.
I heard you. Yeah, you said Jefferson was fascinating. You couldn't say he was a what, and then I lost you.
Yeah, Jefferson was not. Jefferson was interested in religion without being. He was a deist, clearly. Jefferson wrote
Yeah,
something
yeah.
called the Jefferson Bible, and what Jefferson did is he
Hmm.
went through the Bible, actually two Bibles, with a pair of scissors, and he cut out all the miracles and he cut out all the kind of, for lack of a better word, the supernatural stuff. And he just kept
Mm.
and he created this Bible, which is just basically Jesus, and it's called the Jefferson Bible.
Yeah.
And so this is a
Hmm.
guy that was not exactly a dogmatic Christian, but even when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, he wrote about the Creator. Franklin wrote about rights come from God, which is very different from the British, because from England, not British, from England, because the king came from God. God, you were not chosen. God chose me. And the fundamental piece of American philosophy, political philosophy, is that our rights are inherent from, and you don't have to, if you don't like God, you can say nature, you can say creator, you can say pick something, but they are larger than the government. And so we've gotten this
I
kind of absolutely absurdist argument where you've got
yeah,
political reporters on TV saying, no, only the government can give rights. And then you've got this kind of Christian nationalism that says only our ideology, our what's the word I'm looking for? Not ideology. Our theology can grant rights. And it's really kind of interesting. I mean,
it is very interesting, especially because I don't know if you saw, this wasn't on our list, but it's so
Mhm.
relevant right now. Did you see at CPAC where the I don't remember his name, but he said we're going to overthrow democracy. I It sounded, as I listened to him, he was being somewhat facetious and somewhat literal.
Mhm.
But we're going to finish the job. We didn't get the job all the way done on January 6th. We're going to overthrow democracy and we're going to reinstate this. And I guess he held up a crucifix necklace. Um, and and I guess my response to that and to the MSNBC example, while she was factually inaccurate in the perspective of the founders of what they're motivating or where they, I think from a belief system, they were generally deist Christian men. Um,
Yeah.
but from a practical perspective, I actually think she's 100% right. If laws and rights didn't come from men and from ourselves and from us agreeing on what we want to give ourselves, I don't know if it's the government, but I just see the government as us cumulatively, then we wouldn't have added amendments later on that become our rights. We wouldn't have taken them away in prohibition and the Volstead Act and all of these things. They are just us living in life. And so I guess maybe I tend more towards like the Noah Yuval Harari kind of example of Homo sapiens. Of we just have shared belief systems, and it's in that shared belief system that we determine rights and human rights and all. But these are, according to Noah Yuval Harari, and it makes more sense to me, is that these are mythologies we believe in. There's nothing natural about human rights. We slaughtered each other without compunction for hundreds of thousands of years, and we continue to do so. But I think our aspirational version of ourselves is what America represents to me. Is we give ourselves rights and responsibility, which is what people tend to leave out of that equation. Um, so I guess from a literal perspective, I saw what she was saying. From a kind of aspirational ideological perspective, she was completely off target of how the government was formed,
Well,
right?
but here's the thing. I think that she is exactly the same as the CPAC guy. I think they're the same person.
Potentially, yeah. They're dangerous.
Because
Yeah.
they both say, they both say, you have no rights unless the government gives them to you. It's the same argument. The founding fathers, who were all deists and said, no, your rights come from nature. Your rights come from something larger than a couple of fucking mopes in DC. They are
Right.
granted, they are bigger. It is the nature. And again, you kind of go to, the great philosophers, what is the nature of man? Is the nature of man to be
Hmm.
free? And these guys said, yeah. And you make rules and governance. I mean, the Constitution is not about rules about what you can do. The Constitution is rules about what the government can't do. And they had this very kind of sense of limitation. And again, I think it's a lack of civics. I think it's the Constitution is not about ruling people. It's about ruling government. State laws, that becomes something different. That becomes a daily governance
Yeah.
and kind of a practical thing. And there's a push and a pull about, what's too much. I mean, don't tell me what I can do with my car, but you don't want me to going through stop signs or, dangerously speeding.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I certainly do see that argument. I think in my mind the most important, not that there's a hierarchy, but what I see is kind of the most important overlooked Bill of right in the Bill of Rights is any right not expressly given to the federal government is reserved for the people or the states. And I think they are saying in that really, if we didn't expressly say that this is a role of the federal government,
Right.
you're free to do whatever you and the states
Yeah.
decide, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess if I were thinking about a divine creator as generally defined by Christianity or most kind of at least Judeo-Christian belief
Mm-hmm.
systems, I would think that the creator would have put in in the Bill of Rights not the right to bear arms, but the right to health care or some other version of that, which has more to do with human flourishing than the right to have a gun to be able to rise up against tyranny or however you define why you have that right. Not that I don't support that right. I think it's there and I support the Bill of Rights regardless of it. But I think that that's why I would say from a practical perspective, I I agree with you that both of those ends are equally dangerous. I think I just see her through a lens of a little bit more practicality, but potentially it could have actually been her ideology as well. Um,
Yeah. And again, I
yeah.
think that she is nitwit. I mean, and again, to fundamentally get
Yeah.
wrong, what the governance was. And again,
Yeah.
Jefferson said creator. And so you could say he was a deist, but he didn't
Yeah.
say it wasn't Allah. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't say it wasn't Shiva.
Didn't he have a Quran that somebody was sworn in? The first
Yeah.
Muslim senator or congressman used the Jefferson Quran, I think, right?
Um,
From
yeah. Keith
Michigan. What was his
Ellison, who's
name?
now, yeah.
Didn't he use the
No, I think
Jefferson
Minnesota.
Quran?
I think it was Minnesota, and I think it was Keith Ellison. But
Keith
yeah, no, he
Ellison.
was.
Yes, yes, you're right.
Yeah, yeah. Who kind of has since been in trouble for maybe beating his wife, but that's a different story. Maybe not. I think it was, the recordings weren't quite clear. But
Right,
the
right.
but no, but I get it. It's a really fascinating thing. But the idea of, is it government first or is it freedom first? Is it, is there
Okay.
the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? And again, we're
Yeah.
going to say the government can't do certain things. Um,
Right.
and but again, it's a really interesting argument. And there was a reporter for the Village Voice who was a great jazz reporter, but he was also a great civil libertarian, named Nate
Hmm.
Hentoff. And he said the first impulse of politics, of government, is censorship. And he had a famous book called "Free Speech for Me, but Not for Thee." And literally, that's what that's the genesis of it. People want to rule over and make the rules because they think they're right.
That's
Um,
right.
you know, and and again, I think the brilliance of the founding documents is it says, we don't know who's right, so we're going to have some
Mm,
kind of rules so that nobody gets too powerful because we think you're all a bunch of,
mm,
I mean, Jefferson versus Adams, and I mean, Jefferson really wanted a more fundamentally bigger government because he was a slave owner in a slave state with a bunch of other rich white guys who said we can run shit well. And Adams
right.
said, "No, I've been to town halls up in New England, and these people are out of their fucking minds. And so we want limits and rules on this stuff. I've seen this work." Um, but anyway, but it's really kind of a fascinating thing, and I think it's cool that you kind of that we're in the middle of a presidential cycle where all this stuff plays out, both big and small. Um,
It really does. Really does.
I mean, but
Um,
one of the interesting things yesterday, I thought was that it's not quite politics, but still kind of interesting, was Google's Image AI, which got blown up
let
in
me see.
about 20 seconds. Have you seen that?
No, what
So
happened?
it's so there's a bunch of different AI imaging um, products out, and Google launched
Hmm.
theirs, and it was programmed for diversity. And so there are certain things it
Okay.
wouldn't do. You couldn't say, "Give me
Okay.
a." You couldn't say, "Give
Is this the
me a."
hockey players?
It's the hockey players, but also the founding fathers were like an Asian woman, um, and the famous one was there were. They said a picture of a pope, and it was a black guy and an Indian woman, and
Um,
the whole thing was this kind of hot mess. And it asked arguments. It's like what give me an argument for having a family of four, and it said, well, we can't because overpopulation and global warming and blah 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 blah. And he says, I can't do that because it's dangerous. And he said, well, give me an argument for having no children. And it said, well, here's the argument. And what was really interesting is that I think two things were lost with it. A, people lost their minds, and frankly, if you go on Twitter or X and look at the examples, they're laugh out loud funny because they're so absurd. And
right.
it's like you know draw me a give me a picture of a ninth century Viking. They were not people of color.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah,
when you
just
ask
right.
Mongols, and there were no white people Mongols. I mean, that wasn't it. And it kind of had this programming to make everything diverse, which is okay,
Yeah.
but then it wouldn't let you filter it out. You have to say, no, I don't, you know, there were no female hockey players in the National Hockey League. And it says,
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
I can't make that image for you then. And it's just bad programming. But what I think was, where I'm going all around with this, where it was lost on it was the quality of the image. I mean, the images looked
Yeah.
like something you would see in a gas station painted on black velvet. I mean, they were
Right.
horrific and they were terrible. And you kind of think is like, this
Right.
is what? This is crazy, and the idea that it's clearly a technology that's not ready. But even Google, as big as Alphabet, as big as they are pushing it out, and they're going to give us Skynet sooner or later.
Well, it's a very interesting point that you just made that it's not ready yet. I mean, if you look at OpenAI's Sora, I guess is what it was called, where they
Yeah.
text to video, that was actually very good quality. And it's funny, I did not know what happened yesterday at Google. I didn't know that this happened, but I do follow on Twitter several AI developers through my account, and one of them posted that he was just fired from Google yesterday. So I wonder if because of the backlash, there's been some sort of upheaval
Oh,
at Google.
there was a guy that
And
said there was a guy that said, I don't know if it's him. There was a guy that said, I
yeah,
warned these nitwits at Google about this, and they didn't listen to me. And it was anonymous. It was an anonymous account, but I'm sure they probably found him, and he
yeah.
got fired because he said, I told him this would happen. But they're
Well, the
so
guy
big,
that
it
I
really
I
doesn't matter. But
follow is not
yeah,
anonymous. He said
okay,
he was suddenly let go, I think by text message or something yesterday,
okay.
and he said for the last, I think he said 12 months or so, he's had to respond to like a woke czar within Google at the AI level for everything, is basically controlled by this committee of wokeness. Um, and this is what you get when, I guess his argument was like, this is what you get, and now they're firing me. They should be firing that guy. You know what I mean? Um, so anyway, I had no idea this happened, but now I'm tying the two stories together in my mind, and I'm like, oh, now I understand the
Yeah,
backstory behind that post.
and again, it wasn't. I mean, the old thing about programming: garbage in, garbage out, and they did this
Yeah,
garbage in thing, and frankly, it all gets sorted out. It's not something to lose your
definitely.
minds over. I think,
I
by the way,
think
what I
life
think is,
requires that.
yeah, Yeah. I think what is much
especially
worse.
like in tech. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. No. I think what is much worse is that Google quietly today or yesterday apparently also took out, when you do searches, it took out the news part of it, so you can't click on if you type in.
Yeah,
If you
yeah,
type in Donald Trump, you can get all these Trump things, but you can't get
yeah,
news, like, so legitimate
yeah.
journalists
There's
and
no
broadcast.
at the top
I
the
mean,
news tab, right?
and I think that is ominous. And by the way, I also saw Vice went under yesterday too. Um,
Yeah, I mean, but they had. I saw that they had paid their CEO like it was 100 million or something like that. It was some astronomic figure. Uh, at the same time, I think Reddit also released that they paid their CEO. They're about to go public, so it was a disclosure like $194 million last year. Anyway,
yeah,
when all the money's, it's funny, trickle down economics is a separate story, but money doesn't flow down. It only sucks to the top. The gravity of money is the pool at the top. So you have to literally force
yeah.
it to fall. Yeah, so interesting. Okay, let's jump. There's a couple other that I think kind of tie into this a little bit.
Mhm.
Let's take a bit of a turn though, because we are going
Sure.
I think we would probably both agree Nikki Haley will be out of the race by sometime next week. As a Republican, because
She
my
said, I
question
think she's
is,
going to stick.
really?
Yeah,
Okay. All
yeah,
right. Well, let's say she doesn't do well. What are the chances? Because Manchin said this week that he would not run on no labels, that he's
right.
done. What are the chances of a Nikki Haley? And Dean Phillips just said that he would join with Nikki Haley, a Dean Phillips Nikki Haley no labels ticket. What are the chances of that?
Yeah. Um, well, we'd all laugh a lot. Um,
Okay,
I mean,
why? They're both. I mean, Nikki Haley's a serious
yeah,
contender,
but
even if Dean Phillips isn't, right?
no, I mean, I mean, Dean Phillips is a serious congressman. But a guy getting one in the polls and somebody else getting 14 in the polls is not going to lead a national ticket. I think
Sure.
if you're going to be no labels and you are going to spend, you're going to have to raise a minimum of 400 or $500 million
Hmm.
to be competitive. You're going to look for something with a little more juice than Nikki Haley and Dean Phillips, maybe as a VP or something. Um,
Hmm.
I think that, by the way, I think she sticks in because there's no reason for her to get out. What does she
Okay,
gain
but
by
does
getting
she at
out?
least suspend her campaign like you talked about, or is she going to keep trying to raise and
It depends.
run?
It depends on their finances. I mean, I'm assuming they've worked out the finances where they can,
Hmm.
they don't have a big staff. It wasn't like the DeSantis thing where they hired everybody and their brother. It's a very
Right.
lean staff. And so they have
Right.
to go, March, April, May, June, they have to go 4 months. And they can do that as a bare bones thing. But I don't see the benefit for her to get out, even if she's not going to win, because she's going to continue
Hmm.
to stay in the news. She's going to be on forums. Um, you know, as long as she doesn't have to go into debt, I don't think she drops. I think if she has to go into debt, I think she drops. Um,
Okay.
you know,
All
and by the way,
right.
what was really interesting, I think it was Marquette released a survey this week, and it
Hmm.
was on the presidential. And if you're Biden, it's kind of ominous because Trump was over 50, 52, which is like, oh boy. Um, and but more importantly, in the swing states, Trump was up between 8 and 10 points. What
Hmm.
was really fascinating about it was that when you added JFK Jr. into the mix, it becomes a different race. It becomes
For sure.
Trump 42, Biden 40.
Right.
And so
Right.
and so if you're Joe Biden, winning a 42-40 race is a lot easier than winning a 52-44 race. And
Right.
so, you
Right.
might see this effort to keep pushing JFK Jr. along.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Democratic National Party doesn't start putting money into RFK's race
Yeah,
um,
no. And
through
again, I
through
mean,
through. Yeah.
It's not the first time it hasn't been done. I mean, Democrats did it all last year. I mean, I've done it
Hmm.
not to that level, but I've done it in, we used to call it three cushion pool, snooker, literally, that you bounce one
Yeah,
ball off the other to get the impact you
for
want.
sure.
And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
why not? You know, um,
yeah. Okay, well, I actually didn't think you were going to go that way with Haley. I thought for sure you would agree that
yeah,
she. I mean, that's going to be one of our over under questions. I just don't see
yeah,
her unfavorables are so high. Okay. I mean,
yeah. I mean,
I guess to your point, as long as it doesn't cost her anything,
right.
um, I guess it makes sense for her. She certainly doesn't seem to have a job to get back to. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other interesting thing I think you're starting to see this week, again, I thought this was a really good, I mean, forgetting that you were, people said you owed $450 million last week. I thought it was a pretty good week for Trump, because there was
Mm,
also more. There was also more kind of bad Biden news, and now the press is saying, well, he only used prompts and with pictures, and there was another article on Axiom today about maybe he can't handle it, and what you're starting to hear on like a local level stuff, that I kind of hear from different campaigns, is that people are starting to ask Democratic candidates, do you think Biden's senile? Do you think Biden's lost it? Do you think you got to get rid of him? And that's really bad, because
it is,
somebody is
but you
going to,
know what?
yeah,
Because I have to, and also because I'm a bit of a nerd. I follow these things
hmm
on Twitter and Reddit, and I
hmm
see the conversations. A lot of people have pasted and shown some very interesting headlines from mainstream media, which everyone perceives to have a liberal bias. Which,
hmm
when I studied political science, the way it was explained to us and the way we looked at it was journalists tend to be liberal, the owners of the media tend to be conservative. So figure out from
hmm
that whatever you want, but
hmm
that was at the time where, like we talked about before, and kind of the, it's kind of sad to say this, but the turn of the last century, the latter part of the
right,
last century, um, Republicans were the more elite, moneyed version electorate, and then Democrats were the more working class unions. And like you said, that's switching now. So this may not
right,
hold as true as much, but I've seen these posts where it's like the economy is doing well, but people are still worried about Biden and his capability,
hmm
his ability to run for president. It's like they're driving a narrative. I don't think anybody watches Biden and thinks, man, this guy's like in the shape of a 40-year-old. Nobody gets that from him.
right,
But what I would say is that show me it's like at the same time where people say he can't do the job, he's senile, they're also blaming him for every single horrible thing that happens in the world as if he's the mastermind behind it all. Like he's either extremely capable or not capable. He can't be both at the same time, right? So it seems to me that it's really just a litmus test for your own biases, and then you can label onto it what you want, and it starts to gain traction. Because if I stand out in the middle of the street all day long and I say he's crazy, he's crazy, he's crazy,
hmm
eventually people are gonna be like, he's crazy. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Not, and that doesn't mean that he isn't. And by the way, that does not mean that he isn't or hasn't lost step. I have no idea. I just do think it's a narrative now that is being fed because it sells airtime and papers.
and I also think that if you are over 83 years old, you have a 1 in 3 chance of developing dementia. That's just a fucking
Mm,
fact of life.
I didn't know that. That's
And
horrible.
yeah, and uh, or you've dementia or Alzheimer's, or some kind of a mental instability, you're going to
Sure,
get over
sure,
83. You got a 1 in 3 shot. Um,
yeah.
but I think that the problem they have is they're not helping themselves. They released a video. It was a 2 minute video about Biden talking about the Ukraine, I guess it was, and there were 29
Mm,
cuts in 2 minutes. And
mm.
it looked like Max Headroom kind of,
It's a lot of
and
editing.
that doesn't help because yeah, because that says right, and then
Yeah.
they're behind the scene or to the press saying, oh, he's sharper than ever. He was in command of this meeting, and it's kind of this kind of stop bullshitting me. It's like the idea that he can't
Right.
remember. He's wandering around and can't remember who the president of Mexico is there. But when he leaves the stage, when he's back in the White House, he's doing his morning workout on the parallel bars while reciting Finnegan's Wake.
Right.
But nobody saw it.
Right.
Nobody saw it. It's just like, my
Right.
girlfriend in Canada. My girlfriend in
Yeah.
Canada. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they need to embrace the old thing, I think, and say, yeah, he is. So
Mm.
what? But they need to trot him out to some level of competency because everybody at a certain age has a relative or a friend or a neighbor who kind of goes senile, and it
Mm.
happens fairly quickly. And is that where the sky is? And they it is not a. I was talking to another couple political consultants about there are solutions to it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to put something out as ham-fisted as a 22 cut 2-minute policy statement, you aren't capable
Totally.
of it. And
Right.
and again, I think it's a problem, and I think that they are playing into the problem as opposed to solving it.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, and I think all of this is exasperated because it seems that nobody likes Kamala. And
no, she's
you're
she was a disaster, but they couldn't, but they can't get rid of her.
yeah.
Um,
Right.
and but at a certain point, do I think the question is going to become, is she a better candidate against Trump than Biden? I think at this point, it's a good over-under.
Okay. I was wondering if you were actually going to answer that question, and I like how you demurred.
I honestly, I don't have an answer. The Kamala of the announcement and her early primary debate, yeah, much better candidate.
Yeah.
The kind of the Kamala of unsupervised White House vice president, no.
Right.
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 There is a Veep-like quality to it that is really disconcerting.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be curious. I mean, and again, Trump's not that far behind. I mean, Trump is, rambles and makes no sense and confuses stuff. And
Totally agree.
I think the most important pick is going to be his VP.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever noticed, by the way, like his crazy rambling? That shit never stays in the news cycle the same way Biden's crazy rambling does.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, by the way, as well. It's like everything is normalized with Trump, and with Biden, it's like he's some sort of alien anomaly. Like nobody knows
and
what's wrong with him.
part of it is
It's
too.
like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, and I think that we lived. I think the thing is that we lived with 4 years of that with Trump, where it was covered. I mean, they made him take a dementia test. It was like woman, car, dog, or whatever that thing is, that mid-level dementia test. I mean,
Yeah, but
I think that's baked in.
But his bragging about the dementia test made me more worried that there was something wrong with him. The way he acted about it,
right.
I thought,
right.
There's something wrong with this guy.
Yeah, and but I do think that Trump seems a lot more robust than Biden. I
For sure.
86% have a concern that Biden is too old, and almost 50% have a concern that Trump is too old. I mean, those are not great numbers.
But let me ask you a question. Maybe it's just me. I am a supporter of the deep administrative state, at least in practice. I don't mean as far as our rights go, but I mean like if we are relying on one person to be the king of the country, I think we're in a horrible state. All I really want from a president is to be able to give a directive when nobody else can answer it. I don't need him to be vigorous, to be honest with you. I don't need him to be. Yeah. I just want him to be coherent enough, and not even enough, but I just want him to be coherent to understand things and to not make things worse. And by the way, when you make a decision, you never know the outcome. That's true for me, and that's going to be true for whoever's the president. You never know. You can only make the best decision you can make. So really it comes down to, let's look at the track records and say, okay, well, what has been done? And personally, I think Trump was dealt a bad hand with COVID. I feel like that you can't hold a lot of things against Trump because he was dealing with an exogenous effect. Mm-hmm. However, that is also true with Biden and inflation. There were some things that caused it. He may or may not have exacerbated, but if you look at the trajectory under them, it's like we have 4 years of both that we can judge. Right? Why are we judging them based on an old person decline? Because I do think that there's a relative similarity between them. A little less on one, but relatively close. So that's kind of I feel like people are judging them as if they're going to lead us into battle. I'm like, neither one of them are going to do that. It's like, I don't want them to be making every single decision.
Yeah, but yes, I agree. But presidents have to react in crises. And there's a crisis every month in the White House that, if not handled well, the idea that the super staff exists, I can tell you, having worked for this, it's some of the White House staff. You want to start building your bunker and storing canned water. If you saw some of these people and if you heard them, and you want somebody who's reasonable and moderate, and I mean moderate in terms of demeanor and experienced, and to kind of steady the ship, because these people aren't, staffs aren't. But I think that, the idea that you're going to have two men far beyond the norms of American politics and far beyond, the norms of world leaders, leading a country in a, moment-to-moment, immediate cyber world. And again, we all know, we all have neighbors, and have you talked to Henry? And yeah, he seems a little off. And then, 6 months later, Henry's going to the friggin' home, because he's been, burning cats in the microwave or something. I mean, it's, again, I think it's a legitimate concern. I think it's a legitimate concern. But I think it is a little overblown. But I think also, too, is the personality of both these guys. For instance, I think it'd be less of a problem with Romney, because Romney always took a CEO backseat. Both these guys, not that Romney didn't have a giant ego, but not that politicians don't have giant egos, but both these guys need to be the center of attention. They need to be the big swinging dick. And I think if you want to do that, right? I mean, then And again, nothing in politics is nothing in politics is fair either. I mean, it's like, oh, it's unfair that Trump had this. It's unfair that Biden had that. No, fuck you. It's all unfair, right?
Yeah, I don't actually think it should be fair. The American people decide what's fair, and if you don't like it, too fucking bad. We get to vote, and if me is one of 350, if me is one of 350 people, I'm like, yeah, but guys, who cares? But if a majority of people are like, no, but we care, then okay, we care. It's not meant to be fair. It's not meant to be easy.
Yeah. And what's really great about politicians, love to tell voters they're wrong. I'm concerned about the economy. No, the economy is good. Well, I'm concerned about gas prices. They're too high. No, they're not too high historically, because if you look at this and you're like, fuck you, right? I mean, and again, it's this, I mean, it's funny.
No, right.
It's funny because you see him do it over and over and over again.
You get to a point where you're used to telling all your staff how they're wrong, and you think you can tell the people that they're wrong.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, there is a big campaign right now that I'm not doing, but it's kind of a huge national campaign, and between both sides, they're going to probably spend close to $100 million. And I know the guys on one of the campaign, and they've hired one of the most brilliant media minds in the business right now. And the candidate and the candidate's wife are telling this guy he's wrong. And, and this guy is, sitting on, a research of like $10 million research a year budget. And he's brilliant and he's kind of cracked the code on stuff. And, the candidate's saying, no, that's not wrong. That's wrong because I think, and it's just like, and you kind of go, okay. And,
we'll see how it turns out.
I mean, honestly, I can
right.
tell you how it's going to turn out. I mean, the handwriting, it's one of these races that it's, 8 months away and the handwriting's already on the wall for me. I've seen this thing before. It's like watching watching a Netflix, a Netflix crime series. You know where it's going, right? You've seen this one.
Yeah.
But
I wanted to throw out there. We're gonna wind up here in a second, but we talked a minute ago about Democrats funneling money to RFK Jr.
Yeah.
I also want to highlight, is there a possibility where Democrats partner with Speaker Johnson to keep him in the speaker chair as long as he gives a vote to and helps pass foreign aid and keep the budget and the government open? Is there going to be an alliance of foes in order to get some things done in the remainder of this Congress?
Boy, it's a good question. I think there may be some oddball coalitions, and what the coalition is going to be isn't so much ideological. The coalition is going to be, I'm in a swing district, and I got to pass this shit, or I'm going to be looking for a job. And so you'll get Republicans from New York and California and, the Carolinas and stuff will vote for packages because not voting for the package is bad politics for them. And I think you get that kind of.
Will those same Republicans team up with Democrats to threaten the speaker's chair in order to get those bills even on the floor?
No, because
they won't go that far.
And for the only reason is that it's the devil, and they just kind of they were all traumatized by even getting to Johnson. And if it's not Johnson, who is it? Right. And
yeah, but there's not a lot of time left in this Congress, right? And I don't know how many. The way the math is playing out, I don't see it. I think it's a toss-up that the Republicans are going to stay in power. So is Johnson even going to come back as Speaker? Wouldn't I care more about showing something in my reelection, to your point, to New Yorkers, to Californians, to other, opposite color states, than keeping some guy in power from Louisiana who's safe because he's from Louisiana? Why do I care about keeping him in power? We only have 6 months of this Congress left, not even, August recess.
You don't care, but you don't know you're not going to get something worse without him. And the idea that they went through 2 weeks without a speaker, if you've got a short time in this Congress, I mean, but here's what I do know, which I think is a really interesting play. I would bet heavy money that whoever the front runner is for president, and I think there's going to be a clear front runner for president in the fall. Whoever the front runner is, both the House and the Senate are going to go in the other party.
Yeah, people are going to split their votes, right?
Heavily, because people are going to I don't trust this guy. I don't want this guy here. The old political slogan that was, "We need these guys to watch those guys," and I think that, and I think that you're going to see a split government because nobody likes Trump.
I believe that as well.
Nobody likes Trump and Biden. Nobody likes Trump and Biden, and so
I believe that
they're going to put watchdogs there.
I think it's going to split a little bit differently. I think the Senate is going to go Republican and the House will go Democrat, and I think Trump's not going to be elected.
Yeah,
I think it'll be Biden that gets reelected. It's just my sense. Looking at as it stands now, my sense is that that the House will flip. And I think mostly because people are kind of tired of the Republican drama in the House. And I think with the IVF and everything we talked about, but I do think the upper house is going to flip to the Senate. And
Yeah,
I'm
I think the
shocked that it
opposite.
hasn't already.
I think the
Really?
opposite.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I think that
That's interesting.
um, I think that the House is kind of this more mercurial locked thing, and I think with the
Mm,
Senate, it matters. The quality of candidate matters more, and I think the Democrat
mm,
candidates are better, and their campaigns are better
mm.
than the Republican campaigns this cycle. I think it's
Interesting.
um, I think it's going to be a tactical thing, but we'll see, right?
Okay. All right. Well, let's. I want to throw a
Yeah.
little bit out there for the Mexican presidential election is coming up. It's going to. It looks like the two front runners are two women, so there's going to be the first female president of Mexico. And we're in Texas. Well, I'm in Texas here in Austin, and
Hmm.
Mexicans in Texas have until Sunday to cast their vote
Yeah.
in the presidential election of Mexico. So, viva la Mexico! Um, and let's jump into some over unders very quickly. I got to get your take on these. Feel free to throw them back to me as well.
Sure.
We talked about these. We talked about him before last week, but Smirnov has been rearrested. I believe I just saw the headline, and there was a court order saying that he must immediately be sent to the district court in California. They did not trust the magistrate judge in Nevada. So what's the over under 50% Smirnov dies in jail mysteriously, or maybe just natural causes? Wink, wink.
Under. I'll
Really?
say under.
Okay. I
Yeah.
would have thought the FSB might have some sort of radiation sickness in prison.
Yeah.
Um,
Plutonium or polonium or whatever it
yeah,
was.
yeah, polonium exactly. I
Polonium. Yeah.
sadly don't even remember who that guy was in
Yeah.
England that died. I don't remember his name, but okay. South Carolina, Trump over under 63.8%.
Over.
Okay, I'm going to put you down for the over.
How about you? You
I
over
am going to do the over on that one as well. What about Haley? Over under 32.6%
in South Carolina?
in South Carolina.
Over.
Okay, I'm going to split that one with you. You're going to take
And
over. I'm going to take under on that one.
And I don't think it's much over that, but I think it's over that. I don't think it's like 40,
Okay,
but I think
all
it's
right.
like 34 or something.
Okay, all right. I took the under. And over under 50%, Trump will be able to post a cash bond on his penalty, his fines.
I missed that. Repeat that.
Oh, over under 50%, Trump will be able to post a cash bond on his fines in New York. E. Jean Carroll and the fraud thing, which I
Under.
think he owes a cash bond on both. Good. I have under on that as well.
Under. Way under.
He's going to have to sign his real estate. He's going to have to put his assets up, right? I'm sorry?
I mean, so
Yeah, he's going to.
yeah. So would that be 800 million? 800 million of liability, and you need 10%, so that's 80 million bucks fluid. No.
Yeah. It's an interest. Yeah, I also believe. Let me put it to you this way, Chris. If he comes up with the cash, I think you're going to see an expansion of the Jack Smith classified documents case because people are going to wonder where that money came from.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's everything, Chris. It was a fun one today.
Good,
Anything you want to, any over unders you want to throw back, or anything you want to wrap it up with?
No, I think I'm good. I'm good.
All right.
All right, man.
Well, yeah, for Bully Pulpit, that's another one in the can. I'll see you next week.
See you next week, Justin. Bye.
Bye.